You're going to get an email inviting you to edit a sheet in Smartsheets. So you can go ahead and open that email and click Open in Smartsheet. Link, it's going to automatically take you to a page to create a password with your account. It's going to use your email as your username. So you can choose whatever password you like. Let's click agree. So again, you're going to have to follow the specific. Just going to keep the one I had. Right, click agree. You can add your personal information here, or you can just click skip. It's then going to give you a video of just about Smartsheets. If you want to watch this, it's only about, it's just a minute and a half long, just to get you familiar how to use the software. Notifications that we were shared a sheet. So if we click on that, we can click go to sheet. And then it's going to talk about it's going to give you kind of like an informational walkthrough. You can just click next through these, because I'm going to go more in depth about the sheet. Click got it when you're done. Access to this sheet, but you'll notice also if you haven't clicked on all those other emails, there's a little icon on the left, notification, saying that you also have access to 4 other sheets. Again, these 5 sheets represent the 5 metrics that were just covered in the metric training. And so we can go to the browse button, and this is what you're going to see as a user. And you'll just be able to click into each of these sheets to put in the information for projects and monitoring for each of these. So once you've pulled up that invasive management project intake Smartsheet, this is what you're going to see. First, on the left, you'll see on the rows that you can make comments, add things into a proof, and set reminders. But the most important one here is attaching a file to this row. This is where you're going to place the GPS information and photos, as well as potentially the actual data sheet you're taking the information from. So we'll walk through that in just a second. This next beige area is the overarching project narrative and just identifier of what this project area is. The 2 yellow columns are about tracking hours. So again, these aren't going to impact your billing or invoicing, but for metrics, we do need to know how many hours are actually boots on the ground and then how many hours we did monitoring. So you'll see in these descriptions, if you ever forget about that, you can look on here and see that this is just, again, boots on the ground. Doesn't involve that travel, monitoring, or staff time. It's just the crew out there. And then our monitoring hours does include staff, leaders, and members. And this is anytime monitoring. So if you the pre-work to pre-populate those plots, actually collecting that information, and also the time spent putting it into this Smartsheet. So we understand that these numbers aren't always going to be, it's a little bit hard to track for monitoring hours. We want you to give the best estimate that you can, trying to track those. And then this last large section in blue is actually that monitoring information. And so I'm going to pull up a data sheet and show you. Let me save this real quick. But let's go back to the beginning and walk through here. Let's use this data sheet. You'll recognize this from the invasive training. So this is the pre-restoration monitoring that we did on a site. And so let's go ahead and see how this would look putting this information in. All right, on the first thing we want to do is attach a file. So So we'll just click on attach file, attach files to row, click upload a file, and all right, for here, I'm going to include the data sheet as well as the photo point photos. Here you can just see this example of one picture just so we can attach it, but you would have 4 of those photos, or you could upload that in a zip file, but you'll be able to upload both of these at the same time. You can just click open. You see those have loaded here. And then because this is the pre-restoration, we're not going to have a GIS file just yet. You could include the one that you possibly pre-populated plots on, but it's not necessary. But then you can see if you come over here that those are on here, and you're able to access those at a later time. Now walking through the overarching portion of the sheet, the first couple columns are actually going to be already just drop downs that you can only select one thing, because this is going to be specific to your core. So you can just click those. You're going to do, there's a drop down for project number. These may change as projects, come in. You might see more added onto here. So let's look at that sheet again. We said this was an example for MS13, so we'll click that. And for the approved project activity, we've been talking about those a lot. For invasive management, it's just that invasive management one. So this one's actually defaulted on this sheet. We'll show you an example of how for different sheets you have also a drop down to select from. The next 4 columns of activity area over to activity monitoring hours, we would just leave blank if we're putting in pre-restoration monitoring information. Again, this first section in the beige and yellow is really focused on project work, and we can't fill out that information until that work's been completed. But just to go over these, the activity area is going to be the size of the activity area. For invasive management, that's in acres, and you're going to round that to the 2 nearest decimal places. And so again, when we do that pre-work or pre-monitoring, we don't know this information yet, so we can leave that blank. The narrative of the work of what as well, we aren't going to know. We should have an idea because we fill out the pre-restoration worksheet. So you could put an example of here referencing that worksheet, but then edit it when you come back and have actually completed that work. But for now, you can leave it blank. For the activity work hours, again, we're not going to know this information until the work is done, but I will remind you that this should only include hours actually boots on the ground. So that doesn't include travel, monitoring, or staff time. So it's just leaders and members. And then activity monitoring hours here. So this is any hours spent on monitoring for this specific activity. So that would be the work, the pre-work that you do, pre-populating places and uploading them to the GPS, collecting the actual information, and filling out the smart sheet like we're doing right now. And this would include anybody doing this work for your core, so staff, leaders, and members. And so we could put something in here just to see how far we've gotten for the pre-work. So let's say we've done, it took us to go out and monitor and all the pre-work and all that, took about 6 hours. But this, again, we're going to want to change this over time. Once we've done all the post-restoration monitoring too, this number is going to go up. But again, so the activity work hours should be pretty easy to track. If you have your crew leaders, just keep track of how many time, what they're doing, and how long it takes in the field. The monitoring hours, it's not going to be a perfect science. It's going to be an estimate. But these are 2 types of hours that we need to track for our metrics. Again, both of these hours are not going to impact your billing or invoicing. And then when we scroll over to the blue columns, this is where you're going to put that specific monitoring information that you've gotten from the data sheet. And so I'm going to pull up this as an example one more time. We're using this to fill in our information. So I've already populated some of this, but this is going to be transect 1 that we did. So the simplest way to do it is you're just going to type in a 1. You're going to have that latitude and longitude in here, and you're going to want to have it in decimal degrees. Sometimes, you know, there might be 2 zeros afterwards. It's not going to give you the full 6 digits, but that's okay. And then we're going to have the sample collection date. You'll see that it actually gives you a calendar to choose from, which is nice. We're going to do the sample collection time. And then moving on to the site type and monitoring frequency. So this information should be on the data sheet as well. Site type, restoration, site notes, is it pre or post? It's pre. So here it's a drop down. You can choose out of the 3 categories. We chose restoration. And then this is baseline, so it's pre. And then we're going to get into the more ecological sampling data right here. So if we pull this up back again, you'll see, so we did 5 different quadrats for this one transect, but we only have 1 line. So we're actually going to use each row for its own quadrat. So here we could go ahead and put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The analysis we're doing for invasive management in this specific example is percent cover. Again, you might be doing tally counting, but for this one it's percent cover. So we're going to select that for all of them. And then we can get into the species. So you'll see a drop down here of all the invasive species cores have worked on in the past. If it's not on this list, you can let me know and I can add it. Or I believe it might let you type it in too. It doesn't let you type it in. So just reach out to me and we can add that as a species if it's a new one. So Chinese tallow, that was our first one here. Let's see, we estimated 30% cover. So in our analysis result, this is going to be a numerical value, 30. And again, we're going to choose percentage if it's percent cover. If we're doing tally counting, it might be one of these down here. So percent. And then if we had any sample notes, we can add here about the quadrat. So let's look at that. It shows invasive tallow is present along most of the transect, native. So the notes we took here weren't specifically about just one of the transects, but we can go ahead and just write. We could, if we have this, just type it in here, and it'll live for all of these. So I'm just going to put ... but that's where you would put that. You'll also notice that we only put 1 species here, but there is also privet. So the way you're going to do that is it's going to live as under quadrat 1 as well. So we'll just change this to a 1 instead of a 2. We'll go over here and look for privet, and we'll see what that percentage was. It's 10. And that's going to remain the same, so we don't need to fill it out. You can just even type same as above. And then we can go through the rest of these. So we're going to have 2 for quadrat 2 as well. And it was tallow and privet. So 10 and 40. Next one's going to be the third. So there's none in this one, but we did include, so let's see. We can just leave that as 1. We'll just put 0 here. And in the notes, we can put no species, no invasive species identified. What about that 4th one? 100% tallow. So again, percent cover, tallow. What else is there? 5th one, so there's 3 for the 5th one, so we can go ahead and know that we're going to do 5 or 3 of the 5. These are all going to be percent cover. That first one was tallow, privet, and that last one is camphor. And our numbers are 0, 0, and 30. So technically for this one, we only need to do the camphor, so we can go ahead and actually just make this camphor. We can get rid of these just by clicking and backspacing. And what was that number again? 30%. And then we already wrote down that whole piece right here at the notes section. So if we've written same as above, we could copy this and put it in each of the cells to know that the samples are, or the notes are for each section. And that's going to take care of our pre-restoration monitoring. We have all that information in here. And so it's not necessary to go back and bring all of these down. That's something I can do on my end as long as it's the same. If you were to do a second transect, that's where you're going to have here, say 2. Of course, this information, the latitude and longitude should all be different. The date and time, the site, restoration, and baseline is probably going to remain the same. It's fine to put, a 1 again here because it's going to know that it's for the second transect. And so you're just going to keep doing that for how many transects you did. And once we get to the second transect is probably when we took another photo point station. So that's when we'll go over here and we could add that file here once again, along with if we had a whole nother data sheet for that area. On your post restoration, we can fill in a lot of these blanks and also put in the post monitoring information. So first thing we'll want to do is just go down to the next row. And so if you have done multiple invasive species projects, you might have gaps from the pre and then the post living within here. So it's fine if you have another project within here, because if we scroll over, we'll have that information about the date, and we'll have everything tied to those specific rows as far as the photos and GPS information and all that. So don't worry too much about that. So if we're going to go ahead and put in this information for our post. So we'll go ahead and do the full post restoration sheet. Now, since we've done the work, we have the boundary or the perimeter that we worked, so we can go ahead and select to include that. And also the photo points for this first transect. Again, probably be a zip file with 4 photos, but for this example, we'll just choose this. It's going to save all those on here. And again, you can just click on it to access it at a later point. And then we actually know the activity area now, so we can go back and see it's 19.4. The narrative of the work. So again, you can use your project scope section to do this, but if you've just completed the work, it should be pretty easy to come up with. Invasive species of tallow, privet, and camphor were treated using herbicide and mechanical methods. And so you'll notice the kind of things that were mentioned in there. Just like on the pre-restoration worksheet, you're going to want to think through, what kind of tools did we use? What were the species that we targeted? A lot of that should pop up in your monitoring information as well, but you'll just want to include that here. So for the activity work hours, this is something you should have gotten from your team. Let's say they worked there. So let's see. this monitoring was done for 10/1, so we were, and originally the pre was 9/15. So let's say we worked there for 2 weeks. So, you know, depending on how many hours were worked at that site, it's not going to include travel, monitoring, staff time. So it shouldn't be, you know, 80 hours per person. I'm just going to put 100 there. And that's again for all the crew members and all the crew leaders at the site. And then the activity monitoring hours. So this is helpful. Here we know when we did all the pre-restoration, it took us about 6 hours, which included actually collecting the data in the field. So then we can think about, well, how long was the post-restoration and how long am I going to take to complete this? So the post-restoration went a little bit faster, but we need to put all the information in there. So it was 6 hours, and then this is taking about 5 hours. So altogether, that's going to be 11 hours for this specific activity. All right, and then all of this information is actually going to be pasted, like copy and pasted for the rest of the sheet for all of that information. So you can go ahead and do that, or if you don't, I'm going to review this information, so it's fine to just leave it in this one row and I can copy and paste it for you. But now that we have, you know, all of this information finally filled out, we can go into the monitoring and fill out according to the data sheet. And so you'll see that most of the quadrats didn't find any invasive species, but that doesn't mean we don't want to have that quadrat listed. Just as an example from pre-restoration work for quadrat 3. So you'd fill out all this information based upon the data sheet. This is restoration, but this time it's post monitoring. And so in this example, we had 1, 2, and 3 have no invasives. So we'll put 1, 2, 3. They're all percent cover. We can leave that species blank. We're just going to put 0% for all of these because there were no species. And we can copy up here and just paste that down here because there was none in those areas. And let's see, looks like the 5th one was the same as well, but we'll go ahead and list 4 next. There was 10% tallow. Because the 5th one is the same, you'll see you can just copy and paste a lot of this, so it should help speed up the process for you. So 4th again was percent cover, of course, and did have tallow. Let's see one more time, it was 10%. And then this is where we could put the overarching notes for this section. So the invasive species are nearly completely eradicated along the transects. So this part you'll just want to type out completely. And even though that's only going to pop up for that specific quadrat, when I look over the data, given the general context of it, I'll know when you say along the transect that it's going to apply for that whole transect. And then just as before, if you've done a second transect, you're going to go ahead and put that over here as well. So I just gave you that breakdown of what it would look like to, you know, put in all the specific information in depth. You know, I've been a core staff member before, and I understand that that process can take some time, and we don't always have that time when we're working on other stuff. And these are due, again, every invoice period, so we could maybe designate some time to just fill out this information, but what's really important is making sure if we're going to do that, that we have the information in the data sheet and the photo points and GPS information already attached to here. So it doesn't get lost, either deleted off the GPS or other places. So we can do that by first just adding that information here. So this was that, say this is pre-restoration. We got our photo points from that, and we've got our data sheet that we'll reference to add the information later. For the pre-restoration, we didn't need any GPS information. We can go ahead in here to remind ourselves, like, this was for MS 1.3, and we can go over and say there's more than one transect we know. So I'm just going to say we did 3 transects here. So we can go ahead and copy down just to remind ourselves to fill out that pre-restoration for each of these. We can attach over here those data sheets if there's a specific data sheet for every transect, which there should be. And then, right after that, we can put the post-restoration monitoring information. So that's going to, take you, go ahead and upload those files. So I've got a full post data sheet. Again, we should have the boundary or perimeter of the area worked now, and some photo points for that transect. You'll see those are getting uploaded. Again, we'll have this data sheet easily accessible for later on when we need to fill that information out. We'll make sure that this is for the same, so that pre-restoration should be nearly identical, at least in the setup. So we should have 3 transects. So we can make sure to remind ourselves of that. We could even go over here and for the site type, this is going to be a restoration for all of them. So we'll just go ahead and copy and paste down to here. Frequency, the first 3 transects were pre, and the other 3 are post. And then, all of this other information that we have to fill out is going to be on the data sheet. So we can come back and fill that all in at a later point. You might want to upload, if you have a specific file that talks to you about the activity work hours, maybe like a weekly sheet the crew leaders fill out, or the activity monitor hours. Or if we already know that already, you can just put that on one of these. And again, this is all going to be copy and paste. All this information is going to stay the same. So we had 100 and then 11, and that'll just go all the way up because this is all for that same activity. What's really going to be useful about this too is, we know there's going to be pre and post restoration on every single activity. So we could already have this set up. We know how many transects there's going to be. And you'll say, well, there's going to be multiple rows. We have more than one quadrat. But the simple thing is, if you right click, you're going to be able to insert a new row. So we'll just say insert above. So you can put in all that quadrat information. But what I was saying is you can go ahead and put in here, set up a framework that you can come back to later. And then, there's going to be, so for this invasive management sheet, there's going to be multiple activities that you do involving invasive management for different projects. So if we have all this information here, we can go ahead and say, oh, well, we did some stuff at MS15F2. And we know that it's only going to have maybe one station because it's a really small area. So we can go ahead and put that here. Even if we don't have it set up yet, we can just have a reminder that this is what we're going to need to fill out. So this is going to be our pre, this is going to be our post. And I think that's going to be a great way to help you get organized, is by doing it this way and then setting some time later before that invoice is due to really get the breakdown from these data sheets.